Hello everybody and welcome back to another Overwatch League fan thoughts and analysis video. Today is the big one. We are starting Stage 4. Everyone, it's a sad day, I think, to admit that we are looking at Stage 4, because it means the season is almost over, but it is something we must do. It is something we must discuss. So we are here today to talk about it. Stage 4, Week 1. But before we jump into that, couple things I want to go over. The first thing I want to go over is the Stage 3 playoffs. Now, my bracket, if you don't remember, was very bad. I did not get much right, if anything at all. I got one first round game correct, and that is it. I guess I got two first round games correct. I predicted the Shock to beat the Dynasty. I predicted the Titans to beat the Outlaws. Didn't predict anything else, and I predicted the Titans to win the whole thing, and that didn't happen. Didn't get any of my finals teams correct, so yeah, that's it was a rough bracket, but you probably saw that because, of course, that was the video that I made that did the best. I think so far on this channel, that's my best viewed video. So, of course, I ended up looking like an idiot in the video by picking everything incorrectly, but hey, sometimes you just gotta take the L's with grace. You know what they say. Anyway, let's now jump into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the role lock system that is being implemented into the Overwatch League. Now, I've talked about the role lock system that is just being in the Overwatch ladder already. I made a video on that on Friday. Went up on Friday. So if you haven't seen that I will link it in the description as well as in the cards. But for the Overwatch League, of course, they have a different version of the role lock right now. It's not forced in-game, it's just forced by the league, which means that the patch that they're playing on is not the patch that we saw with all these changes on the PTR. It's not going to be that patch. So it's not going to be forced onto them. It's going to be the same patch that we saw at the end of Stage 3, pretty much. It's technically the patch that they just rolled out when they added in Summer Games, but there weren't really any hero changes there. I don't think there were many hero changes in the last patch either, so I don't really think there's any real changes to the heroes. It's just that the composition is going to be locked 2-2-2. And I think that's a smart way to do it. I think it's a lot smarter to do it at Stage 4 than just kind of force it into the playoffs when it finally gets like forced into the game. This way, at least you kind of give teams like the opportunity to move over and change. And I like what one of the senior Overwatch League members, I don't really know, one of the senior like operators, I guess. He had said something like it would be a lot worse to have the game on an old patch for the rest of the season than to just kind of adapt with the way that the actual game is changing. So I think it's a nice change. I think it's a good change. I think it's smart to do it now as opposed to wait until the season playoffs. Because I think you wait until the season playoffs, the thing that you're doing, the problem that you're running into at that point is you're forcing like these teams to adapt on the fly, very quickly learn exactly what they're doing, how to do it exactly right then and there in that moment. Whereas now you're saying you're given 5 weeks now, and they knew about it months ago too. But you're given 5 weeks to play it on stage, figure it out the best you can, so that when you get into season playoffs, you know what to do, and so when you go into next season, you know what to do, and if you're someone who's going to be in the Overwatch World Cup, you know what to do. It's very smart. I enjoy it. I think the way that they're having the players sit on the stage is very good. It makes it easier to watch. I think it's very hard to watch sometimes when it's like, okay, we're gonna look at their compositions, and I'm trying to figure out like, okay, well, this person's playing that, and okay, all right, and do they have mirror compositions? Yeah, okay. It's a lot easier to tell now when you just have like, what are the two DPS heroes? Okay, what are the two tanks? Okay, what are the two supports? Okay, I figured it out very easily. It's much easier to see things now, which I like. So I'm very excited for this change. I think it'll make the experience much more similar to what it was in Season 1. I will say, as someone who has very much enjoyed GOATs, I'm going to hate seeing it go, but I am also happy to see it go, and there's kind of ups and downs. The thing with GOATs is incredibly teamwork heavy. It's not as flashy as something like a Widowmaker Duel would be or something like that, but it's very fun to watch, and I feel like I have learned more about the game itself and Um, just basic tools to improve your play from watching GOATs than I ever did from Season 1, watching just normal kind of basic dive compositions, and then as that kind of evolved. I feel like I've learned a lot more about better play just from watching GOATs than I ever did before, and that's a big part of why I'm a really big fan of what they have done with GOATs in the Overwatch League, and as much as I'm going to hate to see it go, because of that, I think in general it's better. I think it'll be more popular this way, and it's going to reflect more on what we're seeing in the actual game of Overwatch. I have had so much more fun playing these 2-2-2 compositions that are forced on the PTR than I really was having any other time recently, just because of how kind of bad the play was getting, just because everyone was playing like quad DPS comps or 5 DPS comps. It was just really, really bad. So I think as a whole, the role lock situation is very good, even in the Overwatch League. And those are my thoughts on that. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into my picks for Stage 4 Week 1, which you can see now. Starting off the week on Thursday, July 25th, we have the Houston Outlaws taking on the Paris Eternal. Now, this is a hard week in particular to predict because we don't know how teams are going to adjust to 2-2-2. We don't know if they're going to be a lot better in it, or if they're going to be a lot worse in it. There's no real way to tell right now. We have to see them on the stage first. But I'm going to pick the Outlaws over the Eternal because I think the Outlaws in general have had better performances when they've been able to play DPS compositions. And the Eternal haven't really done it much, so I don't really know what to expect from them. But I think we could see soon in Shadowburn kind of popping off if that's the composition that they choose to run. There's definitely some really good players on the Eternal who I think would be better in a DPS heavy meta, but I'm going to pick the Outlaws just because I like what the Outlaws have been doing, and they looked really good in Stage 3. Now they get to run more DPS heavy compositions as well. I guess not DPS heavy, they're just 2 DPS, but now they have to run DPS, which I think is where they do better. Got that Dinxer just getting those dinks, man. Lynx are so good, and his skill is really good, his headshot's really good. I'm excited for that match. We have the LA Gladiators with the New York Excelsior next. This would have been my big pick game if the Dragons and Titans didn't play. But I'm going to pick the Excelsior for this one. We saw their dominance last year in the 2-2-2 meta. The Gladiators have been a little bit okay this season. It's going to be a very interesting one to watch. I genuinely think that this is a very close series. New York won the last matchup pretty convincingly when they played in the Stage 2 playoffs, so we'll see what happens in this one, but I think the Excelsior just, in general, 2-2-2 is where they shine a little bit better, so I think they win this one. We have the Charge versus Philadelphia Fusion. I'm going to pick the Fusion in this one. I think this is the meta where the Fusion have the best opportunity to succeed. This is where they excel, is in a 2-2-2 meta, and I haven't seen enough of the Charge to really know what to expect from them, but I do think it'll be cool to watch Fraggy go up against his old team, see how that goes. But ultimately, I think the Fusion right now take it just because the Charge have some new faces that have to adjust to playing with the team, and then also I just think the Fusion are better in this meta. Finally, we move to my big pick game for Thursday, which is the Shanghai Dragons versus the Vancouver Titans, and I'm taking the Shanghai Dragons. We just saw the Shanghai Dragons in the Stage 3 playoffs. We saw them, in doing so, beat the Vancouver Titans very convincingly. They beat the New York Excelsior convincingly, and they beat the San Francisco Shock, though not as convincingly, but still a good win there. The Dragons have looked good when running these DPS compositions. Now they have to run 2 DPS. They have to run 2 tanks, 2 supports, which is where things get a little bit interesting, which means we have to be seeing Geggery or Envy somewhere on that stage, unless they can, afford to just run Young Jin and Roadhog for the entire map, but I don't know how likely that is. We will be seeing their off-tank play, which has been where they have struggled for the most part this season, is on the off-tank play, which is a hard thing to say about Geggery and Envy, but they haven't really been killing it much in the off-tank play, so that's maybe where they struggle a little bit. Janu is by far the best off-tank in this series, so it'll be interesting to see, but I think the Dragons, the way they've performed, I have a lot of faith in the way they've played, and I think that they can still carry over a good performance here. It's hard to pick against the Titans, but I'm taking the Dragons for this one. Moving on to Friday, July 26th, the Toronto Defiant taking on the Washington Justice. I'm picking the Defiant. The Defiant have been clearly building up to this moment, building and preparing to have a team that is built for a 2-2-2 composition. Logic's Mangachu is very good. You have Gods. We'll see if Yakpung keeps playing or if they put Shark in. You have Aid, who's been playing. You have Neko. You have a very good back line, a good support line that I think will be fine. You have a very solid DPS line and a tank line that is improving. I think Gods is obviously an improvement, and they're all in on him. And then if you run Sharik or if you run Yakpung, we'll see who they run. But this is a roster I think has looked better than the Justice. And while the Justice did just get 2 big acquisitions in Elevote and Lulsish, they need time to kind of gel and mesh with the rest of this team. And ultimately, I just think that is why I'm not so sold right now on the Justice yet. And I'm going to take the Defiant because they've had more time to gel and get this team together. Next, the Dallas Fuel versus the London Spitfire. I am picking the Spitfire. We saw how the Spitfire performed last season when 2-2-2 was going on, and it was in a very similar 2-2-2 meta where they were running Orisa Hog and whatnot. I expect the meta to be somewhat similar. This is a meta that I think really favors the Spitfire, so I think the Spitfire walk away with this one. And the Dallas Fuel, to me, haven't looked that good, and I think that they will look worse here potentially than they even did in 3-3. Next, my big pick game for Friday is the Seoul Dynasty taking on the San Francisco Shock. I'm taking the Shock. The Shock are a team that you can take them out of 3-3 and put them in a 2-2-2 meta, and they are possibly even scarier than they were in 3-3. They have had Striker on the bench pretty much the entire season. Now you have unleashed Striker. You need a Widowmaker, you need a Tracer, you need literally like any DPS hero. Striker's your guy. You then have Architect, who can also play the Widowmaker. That's pretty dangerous. You still have Sinatra on your team too. Sinatra, who might be the 3rd best DPS player on this team, maybe just the 2nd best, who knows. But his hero pool has a lot of similarities with Striker, so depending on what you need, if you need a Roadhog for a whole map, maybe you just keep him in. And you still have Rascal. This team is loaded with DPS talent. They're moving into a 2-2-2 meta where you have Striker, who is one of the best players in the league. I would be amazed if we don't see Striker on the stage for the majority of this stage and the playoffs. But I guess we'll find out what happens. We'll see how it goes. But the Shock are just going to be so good. The Dynasty are going to struggle, I think, to beat the dominance that is the Shock. And it's going to be so interesting to see Striker back on the stage. I'm excited to see him back on the stage. It'll be really fun. I would assume he gets back on the stage at least. If he doesn't, I'd kind of think that the Shock aren't trying. Finally, on Friday, we have the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Chengdu Hunters. Picking the Fusion, once again, I think this meta is very good for them. The Hunters are going to be interesting to see. What tanks are they running? Are they running Jichirin and Among so they can have, like, Orisa Ball? Are they running, who's going to play Roadhog for them? It's going to be interesting to see. I think I'm going to run Among on the Orisa because we've seen his Orisa has been pretty good. He's just not a great Winston. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be a little bit different, but I'm excited to see what the Hunters have in store. But I think the Fusion ultimately are still the better team. Moving on to Saturday, July 27th, we have the Paris Eternal taking on the LA Valiant. The Valiant, I think, have looked very good. They're going to have to be running more 2-2-2 compositions now. They were running a lot of 3-2-1 at the end of last stage. They're also running some DPS compositions as well. It'll be interesting to see who they have running the flex tank role, because if they need Diva and Roadhog, you would put Space in most likely, but how good is Space on non-Diva roles? If you just need a Roadhog, I don't expect you to play Space. I would expect you to put either Agilities or Shax there, or a KSF, one of the 3. Obviously, they don't have Izayaki anymore. They traded Izayaki to the Dragons, so you can't put Kariv on that Roadhog role either. So it'll be interesting to see how this team performs, but I think they have looked better than the Eternal in general. Though, like I said, against the Outlaws, the Eternal do have some very good talent and some DPS play, but you also have the Valiant who haven't played a match up until this point. So while the Eternal had an extra week to practice because of no stage playoffs, the Valiant still have those 2 extra days that the Eternal don't have, since they don't have to play a match against the Outlaws. Next match is the Boston Uprising against the Guangzhou Charge. I'm picking the Charge. Obviously, like I said, they have some roster changes. This is not a team that has a ton of chemistry based on what they just changed by adding Bishu and Fraggy, but it is still a team that I believe in. It's a team that I think is very good. The Boston Uprising, though, I think are also a good team. I think the Charge have more potential, and I think they've already looked good running DPS compositions. The Uprising were running some too with the Blase Doomfist and whatnot, and you can't ignore that. I think the Uprising were looking okay running those compositions, but they weren't looking amazing. They weren't looking great. They were just looking okay. So I think this is a really big match for both of these teams. It's the Charge's second match of the week. It's the Uprising's first match of the week, but it's also the Uprising's first match in 2 days. So it's going to be a close one, but I think the Charge ultimately are going to walk away with the win. My big pick game for Saturday is the LA Gladiators versus the Houston Outlaws. It was hard to pick a big pick game for Saturday, but I went with this one because I feel like the Outlaws are a team who, in 2-2-2, in theory, should do better because it fits their playstyle a lot better, whereas the Gladiators may struggle a little bit. This is not the style that they have been really working on. They've been running a lot of weird DPS compositions, kind of different DPS compositions. Now you have a Gladiators team who's going up against an Outlaws team that has been looking good in the DPS compositions. Gladiators struggled a bit last stage. Outlaws had a good stage. I think it'll be a good match, but then the Gladiators are still the better team. I think they win this one pretty easily. Next, we have the Atlanta Reign taking on the Hangzhou Spark. This one also could be a good match. I thought about this one. The way the Atlanta Reign have been looking recently has been pretty good. They've been looking like a good team. The Spark are very good. I don't really see the Reign winning this one, though, of course, the Reign have beaten the Excelsior. They played the Shock very close. The Reign have obviously shown that they have the potential to win against very good teams. This could be a trap game for the Spark. Spark have lost 1 map 5, though, so if it goes to map 5, I would expect the Spark to walk away from this one with the win. But I think that'll be a good series as well. Moving on to Sunday, July 28th, we have the Shanghai Dragons against the Seoul Dynasty. That is the game of the week, I think. And I'm going to go with the Dragons. The Dragons look very good, as I mentioned. They have been dominant. This is a very tough week for the Dynasty, having to play the Shock and the Dragons, which stinks for them. But the Dragons have been very good. I still believe that they will have a lot of success in this meta. Though, of course, you know what they say. Fleta is meta. He will definitely challenge the Dragons a lot. He'll challenge the Shock, too. But Fleta is going to be able to finally play a lot of those heroes that he made a name for, or made a name for himself on. And it'll be really exciting to see Fleta get to kind of hopefully have some fun out there. But I think the Dragons right now are still the better team, and I think the Dragons walk away from this match with the victory. Next is the London Spitfire taking on the Toronto Defiant. I'm picking the Spitfire. I think they've been good in this kind of meta, and as much as the Defiant have, I think, improved, I still think the Spitfire walk away from this with the win. Next, Vancouver Titans against the Florida Mayhem. 4-0 win for the Titans, most likely, I think. Mayhem are, well, not the best. They're a bit of an interesting team to watch. They struggle sometimes, though they have improved a lot. They played decently against New York in the Atlanta homestand, but ultimately the Titans are the better team, and I don't think the Titans lose to the Florida Mayhem. Final match of the week, Boston Uprising versus the Chengdu Hunters. I'm picking the Hunters because I think they've looked a little bit better than Boston has, though this one could go either way. I think ultimately it's going to go the way of the Chengdu Hunters, who I think have just... They're an interesting team. They're kind of hard to predict. I feel like whenever I predict them in matches this close, I always predict them to lose, and then they win. So I'm going to pick the Hunters because they seem to be the bane of my existence. Let's move on to the divisional standings before we move on to the overall league standings. So here's the divisional standings. Obviously, same as we saw them in the playoff video. Nothing has changed about them, except the fact that the Dragons have won a stage playoff. So, good to know. The Pacific Division has 4 stage titles overall, while the Atlantic Division only has 3. So, come on, Atlantic Division. You gotta accept the fact that you're never going to win another stage playoff, because they're not going to be coming back next season, but that's a video for another date. But those are your divisional standings. Like I said, no movement, all the same as the last time around. But let's take a look at the league standings, which is essentially just a different organized version of what you're looking at now, but a little bit easier to grasp. From here on up forward, I'll probably just show the league standings. No real reason to show the divisional standings at this point in time. You can see them based on just looking at the league standings, who's where and whatnot. But you get a really good idea when you look at the way the division breaks down. You look at the Valiant, right? They're the bottom team in the Pacific, and they would be 5th in the Atlantic Division, if they're in the Atlantic Division. That's how bad the Atlantic Division is. The worst team in the Pacific would be the 5th best team in the Atlantic. So, those are your league standings. Now you can see the Vancouver Titans at 20-1 plus 54 have locked up their spot in the top 6 playoffs. New York is there, the number 2 spot. They have locked up a top 12 spot, and the Shock have locked up a number 12 or a top 12 spot as well in that top 3 right there. They are the 3rd spot. New York Excelsior, if I am correct, one more win, and they guarantee themselves at worst 8 losses, which means they would lock up the at least number 2 seed. They would lock up the Pacific or the Atlantic Division with a win. The Vancouver Titans need a little bit more work to get a win because of the San Francisco Shock being so close behind them. They only have 4 more wins than what the San Francisco Shock have, and the Hangzhou Spark only have 6 more wins than. But they've essentially beaten out the Gladiators. They have 2 teams that they need to beat out to lock up their spot at the top of the Pacific Division. New York, though, 1 more win, and they lock up themselves a top 2 guaranteed spot. So, big week for the New York Excelsior going up against the Gladiators. I guess a loss as well from the Spitfire or the Fusion would also do the same thing for New York. It would lock up a divisional win if those 2 teams were to lose a match, though I don't expect that to happen this week, though maybe the Fusion would lose one of their matches against the Charge or the Hunters. But those are your league standings. As you can see, your top 6 are the Titans, Excelsior, Shock, Spark, Gladiators, and Dynasty. They are the ones who, if the season were to end today, would be guaranteed a spot in the playoffs, while the Spitfire, Dragons, Fusion, Fuel, Rain, and Hunters would be fighting for those final 2 playoff spots, to which I would say the Spitfire and the Dragons would probably be the 2 to get those spots. But that is everything I have for you today. We are very, very, very much getting to the end of the season. We're looking at season playoffs now. No more stage playoffs. Season playoffs are all we care about. So, if you enjoyed this video and would like more videos like this, please consider liking and subscribing, as it does help out a bunch of the channel. But that is everything that I have, so I'm going to get out of here. Thank you once again, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.